Hi Nicola, it's so great to meet you in person finally.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here and see you, Tendü.
The same here, and I'm looking forward to hearing your insights at this event. It's all about data and analytics, and we really appreciate having this conversation with you. Nicola, maybe we start with having a little bit of background from you.
Oh, wow. So my name is Nicola Askham. I'm known as the data governance coach, and I kind of describe it that I help people understand and manage their data better. So I'm a data governance consultant, but I focus very much on coaching and training these days and helping people gain that capability to look after their data better.
That's becoming more and more important with every single analytics application and now with artificial intelligence as well. So we heard during keynote today that they were actually, the keynote speakers were highlighting the importance of quality and governance. Yet they also made a contrast. Governance always is associated with boring. So how do you think about that evolution we have seen and how governance can enable innovation?
Oh, I think, yeah, it was really good this morning seeing them focus on data governance. And I think that I've been doing this a long time now, and in the early days, data governance was it was mainly only done by regulated sectors, and it was all about what you had to do to keep the regulators happy rather than the business value. And I think that's what I've really enjoyed this evolution the last few years, to be much more what's in it for the business. We're not doing this to tick boxes. And I think that a lot of people have always thought that perhaps we were doing data governance and data quality just because we were the data geeks and we were trying to say we should do this and do it properly. But I think with innovations, particularly like generative AI, people are finally starting to understand, and what we heard in the keynote this morning is that if your data's not good enough, you're not going to get the results you want out of the AI. And I think that is, well, it was fabulous news for us, because if the data's not good enough, they can't do what they consider the more exciting things.
Yeah, I am actually very excited that, as you know, that we have been talking about artificial intelligence for multiple decades, but generative AI heightened that awareness that this is now an opportunity for non-technical users, and it's driving more focus to the data foundation and making data AI ready. And I was super excited that when Gartner keynotes talked about AI ready data and also focusing on execution and use cases instead of looking at this large scope data governance projects.
Yes. I thought that was just a very clear message. Just go and get on with doing this.
Exactly.
And I just thought it was wonderful.
Yes, just start and iterate over. In terms of data observability and having ongoing health checks with data, how does that play into governance and quality?
Oh, this has been an interesting one, because I'm having a lot of conversations with people who don't understand that data observability is not the new buzzword for data quality. And I think that has been really interesting. And people are not understanding that perhaps data observability is something that's maybe done more by the data engineers, whereas data quality is more done by the data quality or data governance team. And they're looking at different facets of the data. But I was at a conference recently where somebody very proudly was telling me about this data observability tool that they'd implemented, and they'd replaced 2,000 data quality rules, and they now don't need to talk to their business users at all. They just do this. And he was absolutely adamant. And I kept saying, what data quality? And you're doing it without the business being involved? I find that really hard to believe. And then I suddenly just had this light bulb moment and said, you're talking about data observability. But he was using the word data quality for data observability. But I've had lots of people think that data observability is just the new word for data quality. And I think that's why it's really important that people like us can get the message out there and explain to them they're both very valuable in helping us ensure that our data is good enough to use for things like generative AI, but they are different, and you've got to understand the difference and basically employ both.
Correct. And one of the things that we observed that many of the organizations advanced in their analytics are now looking at that proactive management of the health checks, right?
Yes.
That's driving the observability, because when you try to become proactive, you need to be alerted by any changes in the volume of data, any changes in the distribution of data, or the schema changes before these incorrect data points are populated in your sales dashboards, customer dashboards, the C-level might be looking at. And then I get this question from the customers, and now what? I got alerted, but how am I going to make sense of this? And where quality and governance comes into picture is actually with that answering that question, because you need to understand what is the source of data that's causing that alert and the impact of that in the downstream applications. So lineage governance becomes important. And then if you understand, then there's a remediation potentially with the quality.
Yes, and remediating it properly at source and not doing this repeated data cleansing that a lot of companies fall in the trap.
Exactly. And we are seeing this explosion of generative AI pilots and in some cases a bit of production as well. How do you see that influencing the governance conversations?
So I think it's been really interesting because the obviously data governance always has been this reputation of being the way to stop doing that, and we go, that's not what we're doing. We're trying to enable you to use the data, not stop you. And I think that data governance people are now trying to get involved in the AI governance kind of conversation as well, because we need to, one, make sure that the data's good enough, that they're using the right data, it's good quality. But we also need to make sure that there is some kind of governance about the use of that data, the model, whether the model's correctly. And I'm finding, and in conversations with a lot of people, that it sits very nicely in data governance, because as we know, data governance and data quality are almost like two parts of the same thing. They work very closely together, in my opinion, always work well as part of the same team. And it probably sounds like I'm empire building on behalf of my clients and things, but I kind of feel that AI governance should sit there as well, because we're all worried about the same thing, that it's the right data and good enough to be used, and we're using it in the right way. So I think it's easier for the business users to understand if it's just this one team and this one framework that helps everybody have the right data.
I'm so glad that you said that. I do think that data and AI governance are going to converge, and people will need to think about that. So great to validate that, and also see that you are hearing from your clients and that focus is becoming a priority. Mm-hmm. In terms of AI, we also talk about it precisely data integrity, and we think that data integrity with three pillars, basically making sure that the data is accurate and consistent and also contextualized becomes important. Do you get feedback from your customers how the third-party data and context is coming into picture?
I think that's something that they're only just trying to get their head around, and it's so important to understand that context, because you don't understand what the data's been used for. How can you possibly know if it's good enough for that purpose? So I love that definition, that sits really well, and I think that we need to be shouting about that to get people to understand the context is everything. You can't just look at some raw data and say whether it's good or bad.
Correct.
You have to have that whole context. So I think that's going to be a really useful way of thinking about it.
What other trends are you seeing other than generative AI that's kind of progressing?
So I think perhaps the main one that I've seen that has perhaps changed how we're going around data governance was like data mesh. Because up until data mesh came on the scene, if somebody said, I now put my data on this technology or it's in the cloud, I would kind of say, well, data governance is the same. It's your data, you're just holding it somewhere else. But data mesh is very different in that, because you've got the organizational change and you've got this slightly, a very, I suppose, data democratization, making data products for, and getting business users to understand that data is a valuable asset, having a product that they can control. And you have had to evolve your data governance framework for that. But I think the other one that perhaps I don't understand much about, and I probably should flip the tables on you and say, is that, because a lot of people talk about data fabric and data mesh in the same breath. And I know they're not the same thing, but I think data mesh is much more technical, isn't it?
So I call them a tale of two cities, because mesh is more about distributed architecture and framework, and pushes the ownership to the business users. And to be honest, at least with some of our customers, we see organizational behavior becomes a challenge there.
Yes, I'm sure.
Right, I'm sure you are seeing that too. And in the case of Fabric, the architecture is more focused on driving intelligence from metadata.
Right.
So the key components become data integration, so that you can actually collect the proper necessary metadata. Also self-service data preparation, knowledge graph, those are some of the components. But with both of them, the important thing becomes how mature is the data foundation in that organization, and how mature is understanding of metadata in the organization. And depending on that, I think driving results based on the business use case and business outcomes becomes most important.
And so I think that's a wonderful way of explaining it. That's the best explanation I've heard of data fabric. But it doesn't seem to actually matter, does it? Whatever it is you're embracing, you just need to make sure your data's good enough.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And thank you, Nicola. This has been great. Thank you for joining us today.
It's been great talking to you.